This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
What is it that's analog that can only happen in the room that we need to double down on?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Follow Lead Podcast, a Christian Leaders Podcast powered by Greg Fay Insurance. If you haven't talked to my man, Greg Fay, do so today. Go to gregfayinsurance.com. Today on the podcast, repeat offender, one of my favorite leaders, Brad Lomenick. Brad is this incredible connector. That's probably his superpower. He brings people together, and he does so in such an intentional way. In our conversation today, we talk about connectors versus networkers. We talk about the local church. We talk about what it means to listen well. Such a great dialogue. I appreciate Brad's heart and the time he gave us today. It was a really great conversation. So now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Brad Lomenick. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have repeat offender, last on 2021, Brad Lomenick. Brad, thank you so much for taking the time today.
I'm trying to remember what I said last time. What did I say or didn't say? What did I get in trouble for? Anything?
No, I don't think you got in trouble for anything. We talked about the importance of curation last time you were on, and you're still doing a lot of that, and so that's great. And I love to start macro. How would you describe the calling and the season of life that God has you in?
Well, the calling is connect, gather, and influence influencers. That's my statement. That's my phrase. Probably other people have had it, but it's true for me, and it's always been true. And so that's the riverbanks that I can do a lot of things within, whether it's putting on conferences or writing books or being an advisor or still gathering leaders in small settings. So yeah, that is the calling direction. Assignment wise, I'm definitely in a season of I would say being a bit more under the radar and strategically probably doing more stuff that is private than public, and a bit more behind the scenes probably than my previous seasons of putting on bigger events and having to fill seats, tens of thousands of seats, which required a lot more of a public facing type of season of assignment. But I'm okay with that. I like this kind of under the radar season.
I bet there's a lot of leaders who are listening who wrestle with that public, I need to be out in front of the group versus under the radar. How did you know when it was time to make that shift? Or did that shift just happen naturally?
I don't know if I made a strategic shift. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think about it from that perspective. I think for me, it's always a question of well, what's God have you doing? What's the thing that only you can do in this season? And if you keep moving towards the thing that only you can do as a leader, as a human, as a follower of Jesus, I mean, that if you keep moving that direction, you will start to find things that just line up with the trajectory you're on. And so I didn't choose to say, well, I want to be more of this for this season or less of this. I think it's based on the impact and the influence I can have. And, let's call it a season that I can impact 1,000 leaders in America who are not the best leaders in America, but they are the 1,000 leaders that I can have the most influence on because of my seasons, that then they can go have influence on tens of thousands. And before I was gathering tens of thousands, I wasn't necessarily impacting the 1,000. And this season, I'm impacting the 1,000. And those are round numbers, but that makes sense for me. It makes sense for me to choose things then based on that. I don't, And I'm not giving up on big things and macro. I think, again, based on wherever God has you in the season you're in, we tend to always think that bigger's better.
Yeah.
Bigger is not better. Bigger could be better. Same thing that, having a large platform is better than a small platform. It all depends on the season you're in, the context of which you want to have influence through. So strength to strength doesn't always mean I'm going from this size of thing to a bigger size of thing. And I think that's really good news for a lot of people, because we think it has to go from, I'm putting on events with 5,000. Now I got to go do events with 10,000. Not necessarily true.
I'm always curious, how do you decide on who you're going to pour into? Obviously, you have a limited amount of time. There are probably lots of people who, over the years, who have said, "Oh, Brad, would you, do this for me or mentor me or do this?" How do you know the right type of person that's like, "Oh yeah, definitely, I want you in my circle"?
Well, I would say it starts with their curiosity and their willingness to learn. So I can tell pretty quick based on that. If somebody it's the classic case, Tony, of somebody emails you and says, "Hey, can I get, 15 minutes?" Okay, sure. I got a few of those slots available. Yeah. And then for 15 minutes, all they do is yap. Great. You just use your 15 minutes and I'm for you, but I'm not going to invest any time in you. So, but if somebody says, "Hey, I did some homework and I sent you 5 questions beforehand, and I know that 15 minutes is going to go really fast, and I want to ask you, can I ask you, 5 questions within 15 minutes and get your response? Hopefully your answer will be 3 minutes each." Okay, now we got something, right? So it's all in the posture somebody shows up with. And that is a classic case of the navigation of how do you honor somebody. If you want to get more time with somebody, the best way for you to honor them and get more time with them is to actually learn from them. And so many times we show up, especially young leaders, we show up and we feel like this is my one shot for glory. And I got to prove that, that I know what I'm talking about. That's again, you just shot your shot.
One of the things that's fascinating as I was doing some research and prep for this dialogue today is that you've basically fallen off social media.
Oh yeah. And I fell off the cliff. I died.
There was one post. I think you had one post this year. And it was you running in London, which was looked like a phenomenal run. But the one thing that you've done is you've been consistent in your podcast, right? As you continually shipping episodes every single week. Talk to me about the relationship that you have with each version of those platforms, kind of that long form podcast. I mean, obviously I love it. I'm biased, but and then the media, the social media part of it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts around that.
I haven't given up on social media. For me, it's not, again, if I was in a more public season of influence, I would probably be more intentional with it. If I was trying to create more leads, if I'm trying to really promote things that I need people to show up to, if I'm really intentional about a macro approach to influence,
yeah,
then I would be way more active. So, you could probably argue with me and say, "Well, Brad, you're still doing a podcast that's available for thousands of people. Anybody who wants to listen can listen." Yes, but the podcast for me is value add for me.
Same.
Right? I'm getting
Right.
free consulting and free advice from people I really admire and that I want to learn from. Along with then again helping people who listen, trying to add value to people. I love putting links and resources and recommendations. I mean, that for me, that's the reason I do the podcast. Is it also forces me to do homework and actually find links and the latest album that I think people should listen to, and like looking for young leaders that I can highlight and platform. And the reason I do shout outs on my podcast is because it forces me to find people who are worthy of shout outs. So it's really in many ways a research project that I get to allow people to come alongside and go with me on. And, that's for me, curiosity in the greatest form and learning for me. Now I still follow a lot of people on social media, and I look at social media quite often. I just don't post.
Okay. Fascinating. I love that. What have you learned about yourself in this extended time of podcasting?
Well, the thing that's still true is the best question askers typically have the most influence. And this is true in the podcast world. If you're a good question asker, you usually have a good interview. If you follow the breadcrumbs, you usually have like people finish that interview or that conversation with you and go, hey, that was really like engaging and enjoyable. But it's true about question askers. Question askers are usually they rise to the surface in regards to organizational life. They end up being CEOs and presidents and executive directors and senior pastors many times. So that's always going to be true. And so I want to double down and triple down on my question asking ability. I think the other thing that I'm learning, especially from a podcast perspective, is there is an art, and you know this because you do this, there's an art to pulling the gold out of people. And this is both something that you do in a podcast form, but also I just want to do this in life. Yeah. I want to be somebody who, when I'm around somebody, that I figure out ways to actually extract gold from them and help them find the gold in themselves. And that's a shepherding thing. It's a pastoring thing. It's a influence thing, and interviewing people and actually being able to draw things out of people has taught me how to do that better. And somebody the other day challenged me, and this is probably a model or a method that you've heard of. They said, I think within 3 questions with most people, you can actually get to a really significant point or place in their life, but also something that is really important to them. Meaning that, like, let's just say, can I get somebody to cry in 3 questions?
Right.
And I thought, well, probably not. And then somebody started doing it on me, and they were just following the breadcrumbs. And it was like, whoa, okay. 3 really good questions that are strategic can get you to a place where you are like at level 7 below the basement of somebody's life. And that's an art, right? So podcasting is taught. I think it teaches me on an ongoing basis how to do that well. And everybody's starving to tell their story. Everybody's starving to actually have somebody that's interested in them. So those gifts, man, those skills that I've learned from doing now, 20 years of podcasting and 20 years of doing interviews, I think have served me well.
If you're sitting across from a young leader, maybe a up and coming C-suite executive, want to be like, they're doing the thing, they love the Lord, and they're trying to be a better question asker, what are like some of your go-to, like maybe they're not going to start a podcast, but what are some of your go-to like muscles or exercises to be a better? Obviously, around the water cooler, you don't want to start making people cry, but how do we lean into that exercise?
Definitely, you definitely want to be somebody who really listens well. And again, this is human beingness 101, but a lot of people don't listen. They hear stuff, but they don't listen. They're trying to set up the next thing they say. So the art of listening is really important. The questions that I think are always the best questions are the ones that are most appropriate for that moment. So it's hard to say, well, here's my go-to questions. But I would say this, the question that is always the form of a question that's going to be most helpful or most strategic is going to be the question that is below or deeper than the question you thought you were supposed to ask. Right. And again, I heard this on somebody's podcast, but maybe it was Simon Sinek or Daniel Pink or Adam Grant or somebody. But, they were talking about ask people the question that is not a yes or no question. Ask people the question that will it gives them room to engage with you or to go places with you that they are looking for permission to, but you haven't given them yet. Right. And I thought that was so profound. Like, oh, okay. So it's almost like I'm asking people more open-ended questions that now they can choose sort of the approach they take. And we know this is true from sharing our faith as Christians. Like the best way to get somebody to open up to you is to give them room, not to try to pigeonhole them or to gotcha them, but to actually say, hey, tell me about your story. Sounds like there's some things in your life that were pretty hard as a child. And then stop, right? So they now can choose how open they want to be, how vulnerable they want to be. And then, this is true because you're a good question asker. Follow the breadcrumbs, follow the lead, follow the thing that you sense that you're feeling in them, that they may not even say it, but you can sense that they want to say it. And that's what the great interviewers do is they have an ability to get somebody to go to a place where they wanted them to go, but now they feel like they actually took them there. And that's magic. When you get to that place where you can actually take somebody there and the person you're interviewing thought that they took you there when in fact you took them there. And Oprah does this, Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, the list goes on. Charlie Rose, when he was doing his show, Charlie Rose was he was legendary at this.
I don't know Charlie Rose.
Oh, go back on YouTube and outlets and just watch Charlie Rose. He had the PBS show. It was a Charlie Rose show.
Okay.
He was on CBS for years. He was on the CBS early morning show. He got into some hot water. That's kind of why he kind of went away. But the guy was mesmerizing at question asking.
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
When you're surrounding yourself with leaders who are curious, who have that learning posture, what are some of the things that you do on a regular basis to curate community with them? Maybe there's some below you, maybe some above you, but I just get the sense from a lot of leaders it's a lonely time. What are you doing to fight the loneliness epidemic in your life?
Well, I'll answer it in two ways. One, the first one is how do I curate leaders right now in general? And I'm looking for curiosity. Typically I'm curating or gathering leaders who are younger than me. One, because I think that's strategic. But two, it's because I want to learn from them. I want to be around young leaders because it keeps me young. I think three is making sure that the groups I'm putting together, that the greatest value is going to come from them. Yeah. And this is a generational shift. The old days, like you and I and everybody older than us, the old fogies, they got everybody together because they wanted to say something. They got everybody together because they were the expert, and all these people now were there to hear them. And nothing wrong with that. Sure. I was part of that movement, right? I mean, I worked for people who that was the case.
Dude, I benefited from that movement so much.
Me too. Me too, right? I'm there in the front row taking notes. I think today, and this is a much longer conversation, even for pastors who think, every pastor out there in the world thinks that they're supposed to bring the best message ever in the history of mankind for 37 minutes on a Sunday. And the reality is you're fighting a losing battle there, friend. But what if your teaching and your preaching and your ability to steward the role of a leader of a flock was that the best thing you could do is actually like get them to engage with each other. That's a different way to think about influence. And I just find more and more that my ability is to bring great people together, put them in the room and stay out of the way. Now, so in that case, I'm a facilitator. I'm a Chris Paul, like I'm John Stockton. Let's use some good basketball analogies, right? I'm a good point guard. I'm dishing, and I'm allowing other people to be the ones that are hearing from each other. And that slight shift for me, I think, has given me incredible amounts of influence especially with younger leaders. And they will show up and they will take notes and they will sit there and go, Brad, we want to hear more from you. But man, I think part of my role and our role as leaders is to be as much, again, facilitators, curators, conveners, as we are thought leaders and teachers, and come and listen to me and bring your moleskin. So that's the first part of the question. Remind me of the second part of the question, because I've already forgot, because I'm old.
It was about how you're curating that in your life with people that are even older than you.
Yes.
And like just being intentional about building that community so you're not leading alone in what you're leading.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it's different because and probably you too, like I get invited to stuff. So there's natural ways for me to make sure that I'm engaging. Now that doesn't meet the felt need of a local friend circle. And the local friend circle, I think, is many times where it's hardest, especially for those of us who get invited to stuff and we're sort of, we're in spaces and places and we're showing up to things. That can be the thing that gets moved or gets the least amount of attention. And so it's a good question. Like, I'm not great at it, to be honest. I have to fight for it. I have to fight to make sure that there are people who are in proximity to me that we're doing life together. I would say this, regardless of whether it's local, regardless of whether it's national, international, whether it's digital, the key for me in terms of encouragement and advice to leaders is just have it.
Yeah.
And don't try to figure out like what's the best model. Just have it, and have people who, again, that you don't have to impress. Have people that will speak life into you. Have people that will call you out. Have people that don't really care what you do. And figure again. Don't worry about. Well, I got to have 7 people that are local, and it's got to be double the amount that I have national. I mean, that's fine, but start somewhere. Most of us, if we're honest, though, the Bob Goff question of who are your 8? Who are your 8 that, are kind of the people that you call when something's going down, or that, when you ultimately are gone, like they're carrying your casket. And most men especially might have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I don't think 8's the magic number, but this idea that I've got to actually be intentional about that. I've got to make sure I'm working on that.
Hey guys, just pausing this conversation with Brad to remind you to check out some of our incredible partners. Trent Barga over at the Barga team does everything to help you take the next right step in your real estate journey. Whether that's a commercial property, investment home, forever home, whatever you're looking for, Trent's the guy. Also, be sure to check out his YouTube channel where he's putting out content every single week. So thankful for Trent's heart and his willingness to support the podcast. Now let's finish up this conversation with Brad. Yeah, if it wasn't for disciple making and just the burden that I feel around that, I wouldn't. I wouldn't, because most of my groups are all disciple making groups that turned into, over the years, then turned into deep friendships. I didn't go in there saying, "Oh, I got to be deep friends." What I thought was, if I don't make disciples, I'm not doing what the Lord commanded. So I wish I could say it was like, it was more out of burden than it was blessing, but then it turned into a blessing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and find the places that you're already trafficking. If somebody's in a place and they're like, "Man, I've got one friend," or "I got two or three," if you want to grow your friendship circles, don't. The other thing is, don't. Everybody wants to be friends with Craig Rochelle. Okay, great. Or John Maxwell, or Pat Lencioni, or Henry Cloud, or all these people that we sort of look up to, and we're like, man, that would be awesome if I just like got to hang out and bro hug all the time with Pat Lencioni. Well,
sure.
Great. Okay, it's probably not going to happen. So let's start with where you already have influence, or where you already traffic. And the idea that, going back to friendship, is it, am I in this friendship for me to invest in people, or for them to invest in me? Well, hopefully it's equal.
Right.
But you know what? It's to your point about discipleship. If all of my friends, again, start somewhere. But if all my friends are people that I'm investing in, okay, because I don't. So many people they like the idea of friendships, but then they don't have any, and it's because you're putting so much like requirements on them. So just start with where you are. Start with the people that you're trafficking around. If you like, for me, I've got a bunch of friends who are younger than me, and it's a lot of that's because I'm investing in them, and they're like, sure. This doesn't feel, it feels one-sided. I'm like, that's fine. It's okay if it's me pouring more into you than you are me.
Yeah, and I think the hope is that one season that equals out or shifts back, or does, like, it's not going to stay that way forever. If you can stay the course long enough, it will shift. All friendships shift in different seasons. One of the things that you mentioned was this idea about Sunday morning and preaching, and I want to dive into that just a little bit, because I would love.
You're going
to
get me in trouble. You're going to get me in trouble.
Listen, it resonates so deeply. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on how we turn Sunday morning from a monologue to a dialogue. Yeah,
I mean, listen, man, I am not the expert on this. I want to put a big old asterisk that I don't. It's the reason I don't like. I will occasionally teach on a Sunday.
Sure.
But the pressure, the stewardship, the responsibility, is a lot, man. It's a lot to carry, and it's a heavy weight. So I'm starting there. I would say this, shorter is better. Brevity is beautiful. Especially for those of us who are average or below average in our ability to hold the attention of people. I mean, let's be honest. Again, Rick from Red Dirt Baptist. I love you, Rick. I am a big fan of Rick from Red Dirt Baptist, but you're trying to be Stephen Furtick, and you need to stay in your lane, bro. And how do you stay in your lane? Well, you meet people where they are, and you do what you can be good at. So you're trying to do 47 minutes because that's what somebody in school told you you're supposed to, or some denomination head told you were supposed to. How about you do 12 minutes, and then you do 3 or 4 more songs, or you open it up for people in the congregation to, hey, I'd love to hear your feedback, or what are your thoughts, or let's hear some testimonies. I mean, the idea that we're all running the same play. Again, I don't want to get into the theological debate zone.
Sure. Yeah.
But at the same time, I look at it and go, okay, what's most helpful for people? What is the thing that people can't get? They can't get from an online experience or from a digital experience. They can't get you praying for them, for the most part. They can't get you encouraging them putting a hand on their shoulder. They can't get you like corporately singing for the most part, right? So, but they can get your teaching. And I would love for us to think, what is it that's analog that can only happen in the room that we need to double down on? And I know, listen, because people say, well, Brad, we should just do Q&A and we should set everybody at tables and do discussion groups. No, that could be weird. Especially if it's a group, if your church is bigger than, I don't know, let's say 100, 150, maybe
Sure, 200. Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you got somebody showing up for the first time and you're telling them they got to sit at the table and like have discussion. That could be really awkward. So I don't think that's the answer. But I do think there are ways for us to create more engagement, more interaction, more things that are analog on a Sunday besides just the 45 minutes. And the same would be true for, the middle school pastor who is really in a tough pickle because they're doing 30 minutes and that seventh grader checked out the first 2 minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
And they've worked on this 30 minutes for 17 hours. They've been at Starbucks all day, Monday and Tuesday.
Right.
And these kids are like, I have no interest in listening to you.
Yeah. Can you send this to me on TikTok? That's what they're saying.
Exactly. I mean, and we can all of us again who are old, we can all look at it and go, they just won't listen anymore. Well, maybe they're not listening because you're not interesting. Maybe they're not listening because you're not engaging. So what is it that it's engaging for them? I mean, ask them.
Yeah.
Hey, if we were to change things up on a Wednesday night, what would it look like for us to spend 50 minutes in it for it to be a really engaging 50 minutes? So I'll stop there because I could go on, but
no, it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Well, here's the thing. As you were talking, I was thinking, this isn't just true for the pastor. This is also true for the CEO.
Everybody.
Right? When they come into the office, what are the things that you can only do in the office instead that could be done? Like, it's that old meme, right? Like, this could have been an email, right? Like,
yes.
And, we just got to be intentional about that. So I appreciate the perspective. And honestly, I think as the world continues to get bigger through media platforms, the smaller communities are where the electric juice is going to be at. I think right.
I mean, we saw this with an election. We saw it with where did people want to engage? They wanted to engage in places and spaces that felt more personal. They felt more tribal. It felt more like I was listening to a conversation than I was listening to a speech. I mean, the idea of debates, the old school idea of debates, like the CNN and ABC debates. I don't know if anybody, I'm sure people watched, but like, I'm not interested in that anymore because it's
you don't believe the rhetoric anyway.
Exactly. It's canned.
Right.
It's canned, but I will listen to, I don't care which presidential candidate is on Joe Rogan or on Name the Podcast. I'll listen to that.
That's solid.
Even though it might be canned, it sure doesn't sound like it is.
It doesn't feel canned, right?
It doesn't feel canned.
Yeah. And that's so good. That's so good. Okay. I want to make sure I respect your time. I am curious, a year from now, what are we celebrating about what God has done in your life?
Oh, good question. Well, I just did a gathering 3 weeks ago in Atlanta with about 450 leaders. And it felt like it felt like a new expression of doing it, whatever you want to call it, an event, a gathering, a conference. So, that's definitely something that I want to double down on and perhaps do more of. I would say if you could hold me to it, and I probably won't do it anyway, but you could still hold me to it. Like I had a book that was due 7 years ago.
Stop it.
So, yeah. And
what's it about?
Well, exactly. That's why I haven't written it. Because I don't know. But I think I know now. I think I know. I think I have my finger on the pulse of what feels like something around, the idea of the power of being a connected leader, the premise of, of your circle of people can take you a long way. And what does it look like to be able to actually like build relationships and friendships that are authentic? So if you imagine an updated version of how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Were you teasing it with that podcast on connectors versus networkers?
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's good. You should do it.
That's
how can I help hold you accountable?
That's exactly the lane that I'm going in and that I don't know if that's the book title. It's probably not because it doesn't hold up enough, but definitely the premise of the power of connection.
That's good. That's so good.
So yeah, well, hopefully I'll have it done in the year.
Well, let's set a date and I'll put it on the calendar.
See, no, I'm not doing that. Negative, ghostwriter.
The pattern is full.
The pattern is full. Yes, thank you, Top Gun.
Okay, I know that my podcast family is going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to get to your podcast, since that's really the only thing you're putting out?
Yeah, don't follow me on social media because it stinks. The podcast is H3 Leadership.
Yeah.
H3leadership.com. I probably need a name change even on that because I don't really talk about H3 Leadership. I probably should call it like, Lomenick, Leadership with Lomenick, something like that. I might need a name change.
The name of your next book.
Well, that is true. The Connected Leader.
Connected Leaders. The Connected Leader.
Yeah.
That's good.
What do I have to pay you for that idea right there?
It's yours. It's free.
Oh,
got it.
Man.
You got it.
That's the power of the
Connected Leader.
That's the power of the podcast world. Is we're still operating in the free zone.
That's my favorite part. I just like living abundantly, right? Like it's just let's just make everything better. I don't know. That makes sense to me.
Well, it is crazy. I mean, this is bonus coverage, but I was thinking the other day, like the fact that you and I can still get voices that for 40 minutes to come and hang with us.
Yeah.
And drop gold and not really have to pay them anything compared to the same voices that would charge us, I don't know, 100,000 or more for a keynote if we were putting on a gathering or an event or a conference. So it's a pretty remarkable thing that this whole medium we still get to operate in the free zone.
It's my favorite part of podcasting.
Free consulting, man. It's great. It's the best.
Brad, thank you so much for your generosity of time and your heart. And I cannot wait to pre-order and be on your book launch team for The Connected Leader. The
Connected Leader.
You let me know how I can help.
Yeah. So the subtitles like something about your who, figuring out your who in your life. It's coming together.
Yeah, the Connected Leader, when you realize the who is more important than the how.
Yes. Start with who. We'll take Simon Sinek on. Start with why.
That's a great
Start with who. Yeah, hey, and nobody out there steal that. Don't steal that from me. Don't be taking that.
You got a year to write it, bro.
I know.
You got a year to write it.
Exactly.
I told you guys, what a great conversation. I loved how we talked about the greatest value is listening and influence versus dialogue. And really, I think that this conversation at the local church level about going from a monologue to a dialogue is one that we all could lean into. Not just as church leaders, but also as just leaders in the world. How do we get more dialogue? That's a question I think we all can be wrestling with. So, hey, do me a favor. Let Brad know that you heard him here on the podcast. Thank him for being here. Subscribe to his podcast. He puts out great content every single week. As always, I appreciate you, the podcast family. If there's any takeaways from today's episode that you want to send me, you can email me, twmilt.com. And I'm embarrassingly easy to find at twmilt on Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn. As always, I'm thankful for you, the podcast family. And remember, guys, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.